And when you see sort of like the top, so like, does it take 8, 9, 10 years to build a really great consumer business? It'll take 8, 9, 10, 12 years to destroy it.
Something is happening in the world right now that few are willing to talk about, yet its consequences will touch almost everyone.
The wealth of our middle class has been ripped from their homes.
In the middle class today are trying desperately to survive.
America's middle class is getting hollowed out.
The middle class, long considered the backbone of modern economies, is shrinking at an alarming rate. Chamath Palihapitiya, one of the most outspoken voices in tech and investing, has warned that this trend is not a temporary glitch. It is structural, deep-rooted, and accelerating, and the reasons behind it are more complex than most people realize. At first glance, it may seem contradictory. Economies are growing, stock markets are hitting new highs, technology is advancing, and innovation is everywhere. Yet, for the majority of people, income growth is stagnating. Costs are rising, job security is declining, and wealth is increasingly concentrated at the very top. Chamath calls this the collapse of the middle class, a phenomenon with enormous social, economic, and political implications. To understand why this is happening, we need to look at several layers. First, technological disruption. Automation, artificial intelligence, and digital platforms are reshaping industries at an unprecedented pace. Jobs that once supported middle-class incomes are being replaced by machines, algorithms, or offshore labor. It is not just low-wage work. Even highly skilled roles in finance, media, and tech are vulnerable to automation and platform-driven efficiencies. Second, wealth concentration is intensifying. Chamath often points out that returns on capital are growing faster than returns on labor. Simply put, those who own assets, stocks, real estate, businesses, are getting richer much faster than those who rely primarily on their paycheck. Over the past decades, the gap between the wealthy and the middle class has widened, and the trend is accelerating. Housing is another critical factor. In many regions, property prices have surged far beyond wage growth. Home ownership, once a cornerstone of middle-class stability, is becoming unattainable for millions. Renters face rising costs without the ability to build equity, and even those who are employed struggle to maintain the standard of living they expected. Student debt and education costs add another layer of strain. Middle-class families are forced to take on massive debt just to access higher education. This creates a cycle where debt grows faster than wealth, limiting mobility and financial security. Meanwhile, government policies and taxation systems have not adapted quickly enough to these new realities. Many tax structures continue to favor capital gains and asset accumulation over wage growth. Social safety nets remain inadequate in addressing the gaps created by a rapidly changing economy. The combination of these factors has created a system where the middle class is under pressure from all sides. Chamath also highlights the role of corporate behavior. Companies increasingly prioritize shareholder value over long-term employment stability. Outsourcing, contract work, and gig economy arrangements allow firms to maximize profits, but they reduce job security and benefits for workers. This trend has hollowed out traditional middle-class employment opportunities. Another critical component is globalization. While global trade and outsourcing have lowered costs for consumers, they have also displaced millions of domestic jobs. Manufacturing, customer service, and even some professional services have migrated to regions with lower labor costs. This has reduced the bargaining power of middle-class workers and suppressed wage growth. Now, Pause for a moment and consider the societal implications. A shrinking middle class does not just affect income. It affects political stability, social cohesion, and long-term economic growth. When a large portion of the population feels financially insecure, consumption slows, innovation stagnates, and social tensions rise. Chamath warns that this is a ticking time bomb for both democracy and economic prosperity. He also points to the psychological impact. Financial insecurity leads to stress, reduced health outcomes, and a diminished sense of opportunity. Children growing up in households struggling to maintain middle-class status face fewer resources, limited access to quality education, and reduced upward mobility. The cycle perpetuates itself, creating systemic inequality that becomes harder to reverse with each generation. Technology, ironically, offers both a problem and a solution. While automation threatens middle-class jobs, digital platforms and AI also provide opportunities for new kinds of income. Those who learn to leverage technology strategically can create wealth, start businesses, and scale influence without the constraints of traditional corporate structures. Chamath frequently emphasizes that the next wave of opportunity will belong to those who understand how to operate in this new digital economy. But the problem is timing and access. Not everyone has the knowledge, resources, or network to seize these opportunities. As a result, technological advancement without equitable access exacerbates inequality. The wealthy who have the means to invest in AI, startups, and new ventures capture the majority of the upside, while the middle class risks being left behind. Housing, education, healthcare, and retirement savings, the traditional pillars of middle class security, are all under pressure. Chamath warns that unless systemic changes occur, these pressures will continue to intensify. Policymakers, corporations, and individuals need to acknowledge that old models of wealth and stability no longer apply in the modern economy. Pause and ask yourself, how resilient is your own financial situation to these changes? Are you relying on outdated assumptions about job security, property values, or pension systems? Chamath's message is clear. The middle class cannot assume that the world will maintain the same opportunities it did for previous generations. Adaptation is not optional, it is necessary. Investing in this context becomes more than just wealth accumulation. It becomes a form of protection. Those who can allocate resources into scalable assets, technology-driven ventures, and skill development are better positioned to withstand the structural pressures that are shrinking the middle class. This is not about speculative risk. It is about survival and growth in a changing economic landscape. Another key point Chamath makes is about mindset. The old middle class mentality, steady job, incremental raises, and long-term loyalty to an employer is no longer sufficient. In the modern economy, adaptability, lifelong learning, and strategic risk-taking are essential. Financial literacy and understanding emerging technologies are no longer optional skills, they are critical tools for survival. And there is a stark warning embedded in all of this. The disappearance of the middle class does not happen gradually. It accelerates when multiple pressures converge. Automation, wealth concentration, housing costs, debt, and globalization are all compounding factors. Once the tipping point is reached, the pace of decline can be rapid and irreversible for many. Chamath also emphasizes the societal choices that determine outcomes. Governments can intervene with policies that promote accessibility, equitable taxation, and education for emerging technologies. Companies can prioritize long-term human capital development alongside profit. Communities can foster networks that allow knowledge and opportunities to circulate more broadly. But without action, the trajectory is clear. The middle class continues to shrink. Consider the psychological dimension again. People who feel squeezed financially often become risk-averse, less willing to innovate, and more likely to accept suboptimal employment arrangements. This creates a feedback loop where economic stagnation reinforces the decline of the middle class. Chamath's message is urgent. Breaking this cycle requires awareness, action, and strategic adaptation. And here is the kicker. While many focus on national policies or corporate behavior, individual agency still matters. The middle class is not disappearing overnight, but the opportunities to maintain or grow wealth are rapidly shifting. Those who understand technology, leverage AI, invest intelligently, and seek scalable ventures will be better positioned to weather structural pressures. Think about it in practical terms. Learning to code, mastering AI tools, building digital businesses, investing in scalable assets. These are not optional skills anymore. They are survival tools in a world where traditional middle-class pathways are narrowing. Chamath consistently highlights that those who adapt fastest will capture disproportionate advantage in the coming years. And it is not just about making more money. It is about security, freedom, and influence. The shrinking middle class represents a loss of independence and stability for millions. But for those who act decisively, the same forces can create new avenues of wealth and opportunity previously unimaginable. Pause for a moment. Picture the economic landscape in 5 years. Many traditional middle-class roles will have been disrupted, automation will have replaced repetitive tasks, and AI-driven platforms will dominate innovation. Individuals who fail to adapt may find themselves trapped in stagnant or declining economic positions. Those who embrace change, however, could experience accelerated growth and newfound independence. Chamath Palihapitiya's message is sobering, but it is also empowering. Awareness is the first step. Understanding the structural forces at play allows individuals and families to take proactive measures. Investing in skills, technology, and scalable opportunities is no longer optional, it is essential. The middle class is not disappearing by accident. It is the result of structural shifts, technological disruption, and economic policies that have favored capital over labor. And if nothing changes, the trend will continue. But awareness, strategic action, and adaptation can create a path forward, even in a world where the old rules no longer apply. The challenge is immediate. The consequences are profound, and the opportunity lies in understanding the forces shaping the future. Chamath's warning is clear. The middle class is disappearing, but those who act with insight, agility, and foresight can thrive in the very system that is leaving so many behind. It is uncomfortable, it is urgent, and it is real. The question is not whether the middle class is shrinking. It is what you will do about it. The world is changing faster than most realize, and the choice between stagnation and growth will be determined by action, deliberate, informed, and courageous action. The middle class is disappearing. Will you watch it happen, or will you adapt and find your place in the new economy?